Coming up on Network Africa. Ahead of King Charles' visit to Kenya on Tuesday, citizens seek justice for alleged crimes committed by British soldiers during colonial rule. German Chancellor meets with Nigerian President Bola Tinubu on his two-day visit to the West African country. Plus, at least 32 people killed in deadly multiple vehicle collision in Egypt. Hello everyone and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. We begin in Kenya, where the Human Rights Commission is asking British monarch King Charles III to apologize for abuses committed by Britain during the colonial era. The monarch is making a 4-day visit to Kenya starting on Tuesday and says he will try to learn more about the wrongs people suffered there. The rights group says it expects an unequivocal public apology from the king. 10 years ago, the British government formally recognized that torture at the hands of the colonial administrators had taken place, expressing regret and agreed to pay compensation to thousands of veterans of the uprising. More than 10,000 were killed when the British authorities suppressed a pro-independence movement in the 1950s. 1,000 were hanged after summary trials. Meanwhile, some Kenyan communities, including Nandi, Kipsigis and Pokot, are also demanding for apologies and financial compensation from the UK government for historical injustices committed against them during colonial rule. The communities are also calling on the UK to return their traditional artifacts and ancestral lands which were grabbed by the colonial regime and are still held by the British entities. More than 100 years after his death, Koitale Samoei, a colonial-era chief of Nandi people who fought against the British colonial rule, was finally honored and commemorated in a mausoleum in Nandi Hills of Kenya. Leading his tribesmen against Britain in the early 20th century in western Kenya for more than a decade, he is regarded as a hero and legendary leader among the Kalenjin community. According to historical records, Samoei was murdered in 1905 by a British intelligence officer ahead of UK King Charles III's official visit to the East African country. Samoei's great-grandson and historian Kipchoge Arap Chomo is hoping to address the long-standing issue regarding the late chief's remains and seek apology from the British government.
We got the report from those elders who were there that the next day they found Samoei's body headless, and they buried that headless body. And that's why one of the demands on one of the appeals we are making to the British government is that they please return that head. They return that skull, whatever there is. We believe among the skulls which are found in British museums is Koitale Samoei's skull. In fact, we don't request. In fact, we have to demand a public apology from the government of British because of the atrocities they meted on our people. The first one is apology. After the apologies, we also expect a reparation.
Let's get more on this. Joining us now is VOA's correspondent, Mariama Diallo in Nairobi. Mariama, good to see you again today.
Great to see you. I'm happy to be here today.
Yeah, so how are Kenyans reacting to King Charles' expected visit to the country tomorrow?
I think the feeling is mixed, to say the least. You have a lot of people who are excited, who feel special, actually, that King Charles made Kenya the first Commonwealth country and the first in Africa that he visits since he became king a little over a year ago. So for that, they are thankful, and for that, they feel very special in that sense. But on the other hand, you have other people who are wondering, actually, why King Charles is coming to their country, why why Kenya, why Africa, being basically the third foreign trip that he's taken. Let's remember that he's been to France, he's been to Germany, and the third foreign trip he's taken is coming here. So basically, it's a little bit mix, and I think a lot of people are expecting. They're just waiting to see what this trip is going to mean and what he's going to do while he's here. So that's what we have for now.
Right. So, as we reported earlier, you did say mixed feelings, and a lot of people are expecting apologies for what happened in the 1900s and 1950s, leading up to Kenya's independence. Many want apologies. Many want valuables to be returned. So, help us understand what a majority of Kenyans are looking forward to as King Charles is expected to visit from Tuesday.
I think you mentioned it. The Kenyan Human Rights Commission actually today submitted a letter to the UK High Commissioner here in Nairobi with lots of demands, and a lot of those demands have to do related, obviously, to land issues or related to how certain people were treated, during colonialism and post-colonial during post-colonial times. So I think you have a mix of that. That's the Kenyan Human Rights Commission. We remember that also, just to be balanced, that Britain had actually 10 years ago acknowledged the wrongs that it did during the 1950s uprising by the Mau Mau community, by the Mau Mau group. And 10 years ago, Britain had actually apologized and had so I'm getting another call here while I'm on the computer, so I'll just turn it off and continue. And but while the descendant and people who lived that uprising were happy at the time that it was acknowledged, I think the compensation that was given to them, I think it was about $3,500 for each victim. Some people thought it was not enough. It did not, it did not kind of solve all the issues that came with the pain and the suffering and the long-term effects that came with that uprising.
And do give us a breakdown, Mariama, of the King's activities during his visit. Buckingham Palace did say that he will acknowledge painful aspects of UK and Kenya's shared history. What more can you tell us about his itinerary when he does arrive?
Yes, and I think a lot of the people, and I think maybe all Kenyans or even a lot of Africans or everybody who's interested in this trip is waiting to see what that means, because from Buckingham Palace, it did say that the king will talk about or will address some of those, the painful aspects. And but nobody knows what it's going to look like. For the itinerary, I think it will start with the welcoming ceremony at the State House tomorrow morning on Tuesday. And I think he's expected to visit a library. He's expected while he's here to also visit Uhuru Gardens, which is and lay a wreath on the tombs of the unknown. He's also, I think, going to visit the Nairobi National Park. He's going to participate in an event at Karura Forest, one of the huge, big park right here in the middle of the city. So there are a lot of stuff that he is expected to do. I think he's going to be meeting with members of the United Nations and activities like that. So he's supposed to stay 2 days here. I think at the national park, he will be visiting the ivory burning site and also help feed orphan elephants, among other things that he'll be doing. But he will be here in Nairobi for 2 days, and he goes to Mombasa after that. And in Mombasa, I think he's expected, from what I've had so far, he will be visiting one of the oldest mosques in Kenya, or even oldest mosque maybe in Africa. He will visit a church. He's expected to ride an electric tuk-tuk. So I guess we will all just wait to see what the activities will be like. And but there's a lot of planned stuff for sure. I've just given you a quick summary of some of the places he'll be visiting.
Right. So finally, 10 years ago, the British government formally recognized that torture, part of that painful past at the hands of the colonial administrators, had indeed taken place, expressing regret and agreed to pay compensation to thousands of veterans of the uprising. Has this been achieved?
I think it's a very good question, and that's a question I posed today to the person from the executive director of the Kenyan Human Rights Commission, who had actually explained that at the time they used that case, when they used the case, it was a few thousand people, a little more than like a 5,000 people that they just to bring the case to Britain. So I think there is a little bit of a kind of it's not a confusion, but at least clarification as to did they compensate the number of people whose names were in that case, because it wasn't obviously just about 5,000 people. There were more people from that Mau Mau uprising that are still here, and that's what you sometimes hear from these people. The people who are still alive, or their grandchildren or their children are still asking, and some of them are saying they were never compensated, but maybe they were not compensated because they were not part of that case. So it remains to be seen what it means. Since some parts of them were compensated, is that going to be extended to other people? I guess we will have to wait and see.
Right, Mariama, thank you for your time, and thank you for updating us on that expected visit.
Thank you very much for having me.
And back here in Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu has declared the country's readiness to partner with willing governments and investors, saying Nigeria has improved its business environment and it's going through several reforms. The president made this declaration while meeting with the German Chancellor, who is on a 2-day visit to Nigeria. Following discussions with President Tinubu, the Chancellor paid a visit to the ECOWAS Secretariat, where he also had a closed-door meeting with the ECOWAS president. Channels Television State House correspondent Larry Lassisi reports.
The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, arriving at the presidential villa for an official visit, is received by President Bola Tinubu and a delegation of ministers and other top government officials. After a brief closed-door meeting between the two leaders, they move into a bilateral meeting. The German Chancellor made clear their readiness to invest in Nigeria's power sector.
You know this, about 90 German companies are present in Nigeria today, and they have already created 17,000 jobs, much more to come if we are successful in the things we do. And this is the same with the Presidential Power Initiative that is at work since a long time now, and it would be a very good thing if we can now start with this implementing.
Following the meetings, the two leaders address a press conference and speak on their agreements, especially on Nigeria's gas potentials.
The LNG also to facilitate the shipment of liquefied gas to Europe is well discussed and in advance. We have an eye on this.
If there is a better chance for exporting the produced gas, for instance, to other places with enlarging the LNG capacities, as you mentioned here, I think this is also then a question for German companies to do their special private business and doing contracts with business companies here in Nigeria.
The German leader then leaves the presidential villa. His next stop is the Secretariat of the Economic Community of West African State, where he is received by the ECOWAS president. They immediately proceed into a closed-door meeting. After about 20 minutes, they arrive to brief the press.
Kurzum, die ECOWAS ist ein wesentlicher Player.
Speaking to an interpreter, the Chancellor speaks on the coups plaguing the region while emphasizing the need for economic investment to boost security cooperation.
When we look to the recent coups, for example, in Niger, it has been very important that we have this close cooperation with ECOWAS. because we want to make sure that these military coups do not set a trend, but that this is something that can be stopped.
The German Chancellor is the first head of government among the top economies in the world to visit Nigeria under President Tinubu, and it's considered significant in the effort by the administration to woo more investors into Nigeria. Lanre Lasese, Channels Television News.
Still ahead on the program. Jubilation galore as South Africans celebrate across the country following yet another win at the Rugby World Cup. Details in a moment. Welcome back. Sudan's army says it has detained children who are said to have been forced to fight alongside the paramilitary rapid support forces in the ongoing conflict. State-owned Sudan TV says the unspecified number of children are being held in Wadi Saidna, northern Khartoum. Back in September, the Sudanese armed forces handed over 30 children who were held as prisoners of war to the International Committee of the Red Cross. The RSF has repeatedly accused of violating international laws by recruiting minors in the ongoing conflict in Sudan. Meanwhile, the RSF said on Saturday that 260 Sudan Army soldiers joined its ranks in Khartoum. Fighting continues between the army and the RSF in Khartoum, Darfur and Kordofan, and amid reports that renewed talks in Saudi Arabia are focusing on reaching a ceasefire and humanitarian support. Elsewhere now, at least 32 people have died after a passenger bus slammed into a parked vehicle on a highway linking the Egyptian capital Cairo and the Mediterranean city of Alexandria. Authorities say the multi-car pileup, which set some vehicles ablaze, has also left at least 63 others injured. Videos show ambulances on the scene of the crash on the Cairo-Alexandria Desert Road to transport the injured to nearby hospitals. Local media reports say that the bus was on its way to Cairo when it hit the parked vehicle. Other cars slammed into the bus, with some catching fire. Deadly traffic accidents claim thousands of lives every year in Egypt, which has a poor transportation safety record. The crashes and collisions are mostly caused by speeding, bad roads, or poor enforcement of traffic laws. Lawmakers in Ghana are demanding an investigation into alleged military brutality against the youth of Garu in the northeast part of the country, and for perpetrators to be brought to book. Soldiers are alleged to have raided the community on Sunday in what appears to be a reprisal attack following an assault on some national security intelligence officers deployed there to fight terrorism. However, Ghana's Ministry of National Security has denied the allegation, saying the security operation was launched to seize weapons used by a vigilante group to attack its officers last week. Members of Parliament for Garu and Tampani constituencies, also who are pushing for the investigation, condemned the attacks and are calling for the immediate withdrawal of the military from the area. The legislators also want the young people who were arrested to be released and those injured in the process compensated by the government. The United Nations says a record 6.9 million people are now internally displaced within the Democratic Republic of Congo due to escalating violence. The vast majority of those displaced live in the east, where conflict is cited as the primary cause. In North Kivu, up to 1 million people have fled their homes this year due to the ongoing fighting with M23 rebels. The UN's International Organization for Migration says it has collected tracking data from all of the 26 of the country's provinces, further warning that DR Congo is facing one of the world's biggest displacement and humanitarian crisis. President of the Congress of South African Trade Union, Kosatu Zingiswa Lossi, says that decent working conditions must be at the center of every trade deal struck by the country at the AGOA summit this week. Meanwhile, Business Unity South Africa, that's Cas Covadia, has pledged support for the government's efforts to ensure South Africa retains its AGOA benefits. They joined South Africa's Minister of Trade, Ibrahim Patel, at a State of Residence media briefing ahead of the event.
we absolutely clear that to a great extent, the trade and investment relationships and the trade and investment projects will be driven by business, facilitated by government, because this is all about business and the economy, and work with our colleagues in labor to ensure that we have garnered the benefits of AGOA in a way that we also address our unemployment situation and create jobs. And we would want to see, and we will see, an ongoing partnership between the three stakeholders.
AGOA has not just been important to South Africa's industrial development, but also to those of other African states, in particular our neighboring countries. And we also strongly believe that if South Africa were to exit from AGOA, it would not only be a devastating blow to local jobs in South Africa, but also to those that are within the region, and further it will add pressure to an already unmanageable migration flow to South Africa. So, as you all know and appreciate, that as a trade union movement, our mandate is to protect workers' jobs and to tackle unemployment. Our participation is as a result of realizing.
And South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has praised the Springboks, hailing their victory at the Rugby World Cup as a remarkable and inspiring national achievement. This follows the victory against New Zealand in France on Saturday night. He penned an impassioned call for national unity in the wake of the country's victory. Fans celebrated the win in Paris for an unprecedented fourth time.
I think they're picking people to try possibly. Used to test. So it's been given, it's been coming from.
Given the serious challenges that the country and the world is facing, this win could not have come at a better time.
Oh, it means the world. Watching them from the start until the finish, nail-biting stuff. We were always behind the boys, and we're so happy for the boys.
As a country, each and every one, we stand together. We are proud as South Africans. Let's go, Boka! Go, Boka!
Let's bring you some more from what we started with, and that's King Charles and Queen Camilla's trip to Kenya. Well, ahead of that visit, the British High Commission asked local visual artist collective Matwana Matutu Culture to design several vans, locally known as matatus, for use by the royal couple while they are in Nairobi. Matatu is a word for taxi in colloquial Swahili, one of Kenya's official languages. In Nairobi, matatu or shared taxi owners often theme their vehicles and hire artists who cover them with portraits of famous people, slogans, or even sayings. Meg Wangi is one of the artists who designed the royal matatus, and she says she's grateful for the opportunity. She explains that their art collective works to expand public transport culture, where they create designs for the shared taxis using graffiti, lights, and paint. The creative designs of various shared taxis are hard to miss in the streets of Nairobi's central business district. This local transport mode is affordable and convenient, and many people here use them to get around. We began in Kenya and we ended it in Kenya. That's our program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Joker Rogers.